Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, watching the stars drift past the main window. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he barely noticed. 3 months into their deep space mission, the routine had become second nature. Survey, scan, record, move on. Find new worlds that might one day become home to humans who needed more space than Earth could give. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," called Lisa Carter from her science station. Her fingers danced across the control panel, pulling up data that made her frown. "There's a signal coming from the Kepler 442 system." Jake turned toward her, setting down his cup. "What kind of signal?" "Artificial. Definitely not natural. It's weak, but it's there." Lisa looked up at him, her brown eyes wide with excitement. "Sir, that system is supposed to be dead. No planets in the habitable zone, no signs of life. We marked it as empty space on our charts." Ryan Brooks, the navigation officer, leaned forward in his chair. "How far are we from there?" 2 days at HFY Star. "Current speed," Lisa replied. "But, Captain, if there's really something there?" Jake nodded slowly. In 20 years of space travel, he had learned to trust his instincts. Something about this felt important. "Change course, Ryan. Take us to Kepler 442. "Yes, sir." The next 2 days passed slowly. The crew ran every test they could think of, trying to learn more about the signal. It grew stronger as they approached, but it remained a mystery. Maria Santos, their communications expert, worked around the clock trying to decode it. "It's not random," she told Jake as they entered the system. "There's a pattern, but it's unlike anything in our databases. Whatever sent this signal, it wasn't made by humans." Jake felt his heart beat faster. First contact. Every captain dreamed of it, but few expected it to actually happen. "Are we looking at an alien signal?" "I think so, sir. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system." What they saw made everyone on the bridge go silent. A massive structure hung in space where no planet should exist. It was huge. Easily the size of Earth's moon, but clearly artificial. Metal and some kind of crystal material formed patterns that hurt to look at directly. Lights blinked across its surface in sequences that suggested life. But the whole thing felt empty somehow. "My God," whispered Lisa. "It's a space station." "Or a ship," added Ryan. "I've never seen anything like it." Jake stared at the structure, trying to understand what he was seeing. "Any signs of life?" Lisa ran her scans. "Power signatures, yes. Life signs, I'm not sure. The materials are blocking most of our sensors, but there's definitely energy moving through that thing." "Communications?" Jake asked Maria. "Nothing incoming. The signal we followed is still broadcasting, but it's automated. I'm not picking up any active communications." Jake made his decision. "We're going aboard." "Sir?" Ryan turned to look at him. "Shouldn't we report this back to Earth first?" "By the time a message reaches Earth and they send instructions back, we'll have been sitting here for 8 months, Jake replied. "Besides, if this is first contact, I want to handle it right. Take us in closer, Ryan. But keep us ready to run, if we need to." The horizon moved slowly toward the alien structure. Up close it was even more impressive. The hull seemed to shift and change as they watched, though Jake knew that was probably just the way the light hit it. Docking ports were visible, sized for ships much larger than the horizon, but Ryan found one that looked like it might work. "Atmosphere on the other side of that airlock," Lisa reported. "Breathable for humans, actually. Temperature is comfortable. Gravity appears to be Earth normal." "Almost like they were expecting us," Jake muttered, then shook his head. "Coincidence? Has to be." They docked with only minor difficulty. The alien port seemed to adjust itself to fit their ship, which should have been impossible but somehow worked anyway. Jake selected his away team carefully. Lisa would come for her scientific knowledge. Maria would handle any communication attempts. Ryan would stay with the ship in case they needed a quick escape. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Beyond it lay a corridor that stretched into darkness, lit by strips of soft blue light along the walls. The air smelled clean but strange, with a metallic taste that made Jake think of storms. "Stay close," he told his team as they stepped inside. Record everything. The corridor was wide enough for 10 people to walk side by side. The walls were covered in symbols that looked like writing, though unlike any language Jake had ever seen. The symbols seemed to glow faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the lights overhead. They walked for several minutes before reaching a large chamber. Jake stopped at the entrance, amazed by what he saw. The room was enormous, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows above. Workstations filled the space, each one clearly designed for beings much taller than humans. Screens still showed data, though Jake couldn't read any of it. "It's like they just left," Lisa said quietly. "Everything is still running, but there's nobody here." Maria was examining one of the workstations. "Captain, look at this." She pointed to a screen showing what looked like a star map. "I think these are navigation charts." Jake joined her, studying the display. "Can you make sense of it?" "Some of it. These look like stellar positions, and this area here." She traced a section with her finger. "This might be our local space. But look at all these other markers. If this is accurate, there are hundreds of inhabited systems marked on here." "We're not alone," Lisa breathed. "We're not even close to alone." They spent the next hour exploring the chamber, finding more workstations and more mysteries. The beings who built this place were clearly advanced far beyond human technology. Everything worked with smooth efficiency, responding to touch in ways that seemed almost magical. It was Lisa who found the first clue about who these aliens were. Deep in a side alcove, she discovered a workstation that seemed different from the others. The symbols on its screen were more complex, and when she touched the surface, images appeared. "Captain, you need to see this," she called. Jake and Maria hurried over. The screen now showed what looked like historical records. Images of tall, slender beings with 4 arms and large eyes. Their technology, their cities, their ships. And at the bottom of the display, symbols that might have been their name for themselves. "Zelani," Maria read slowly, sounding out the alien word. "I think that's what they called themselves." But it was what Lisa found next that changed everything. Deep in the computer system, she discovered files that made her blood run cold. Files about other alien species. Dozens of them. And at the very end of the list, a file that made her hands shake. A file labeled human in the alien language, with a classification that her translation program rendered as extreme danger, quarantine recommended. "Captain," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I think we need to see this." Jake stared at the alien symbols on the screen, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The file about humans was extensive, far longer than he would have expected. How long had these aliens been watching Earth? "Can you translate more of this?" he asked Maria. Maria worked at the controls, her face tight with concentration. "The translation system is learning as it goes. Give me a few minutes." She paused, then looked up at Jake with worry in her eyes. "Captain, some of these other files, they're about species I've never heard of. Dozens of them." Lisa had moved to another workstation and was pulling up different displays. "Jake, come look at this. I think I found something big." The screen she was working on showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Hundreds of star systems were marked, with different colored symbols. Red ones, blue ones, green ones, each color seeming to represent something different. "This isn't just a map," Lisa explained. "It's like a census. Look at all these marked systems. Each color seems to represent a different alien species." Jake counted the colors. "How many different species are we looking at?" "At least 40. Maybe 50. Lisa touched the screen and zoomed in on a section. "And look at this. All these systems are connected by what looks like trade routes. This isn't just a collection of species, it's an organized civilization." Maria called out from her station, "I'm getting more translation data. Captain, you're going to want to hear this." She read from her screen. "The file calls itself Galactic Confederation Census and Cultural Analysis. It's some kind of official government document." "Government?" Jake moved closer to her station. "You mean all these species work together?" It looks that way. There are detailed profiles for each member species, their homeworlds, their populations, their roles. Maria frowned at the screen. That's strange. Each species seems to have a specific job or function in this confederation. Lisa joined them, leaving her map display running. What kind of jobs? Well, these Zilani we found evidence of earlier. They're listed as primary engineers and architects. There's another species called the Korthak who are medical and biological specialists. The Vexhai are diplomatic and mediation caste. Maria scrolled through more entries. Every single species has a defined role. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. And what does it say about humans? Maria was quiet for a long moment reading. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. It says we don't fit. The file is huge, Captain. They've been studying us for over 200 years. 200 years? Lisa gasped. They've been watching us since before we even had powered flight? The earliest entries date back to 1823, Maria confirmed. They've documented everything, our wars, our technology, our culture, but the tone of the reports. She shook her head. They're afraid of us. Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. Afraid? We can barely get to our own moon reliably. And they're afraid of us? Not afraid of our technology, Maria said, still reading. Afraid of something else. Listen to this entry from 1943. Human subjects continue to display unprecedented adaptability. Single individuals observed mastering multiple skill sets that would typically require separate specialist castes. Recommend continued observation and development of containment protocols. Containment protocols? Jake's voice was sharp. Maria nodded grimly. It gets worse. There's an entire section devoted to what they call the human problem. They can't figure out how to classify us. Lisa was back at her workstation pulling up more files. Jake, I found their psychological profiles. You need to see this. She gestured for them to join her. According to this, every other species in their confederation evolved to fill specific niches. The Zilani are builders. The Korthak are healers. The Vexhai are negotiators. Each species has one primary strength. And humans? Jake asked, though he was starting to suspect the answer. Humans do everything, Lisa read from the screen. The report says we're dangerously unpredictable because we refuse to specialize. One human might be a warrior, scientist, artist, and diplomat all at the same time. Maria had found another section of files. There are behavioral studies here. They document humans in crisis situations. Look at this entry about World War II. Human subjects displayed impossible coordination between specialist roles. Single units observed performing engineering, medical, tactical, and diplomatic functions simultaneously. No other known species exhibits this cross-functional capability. Jake was beginning to understand. They're not afraid of what we are. They're afraid of what we represent. A threat to their entire system, Lisa agreed. If every species has one job, one role to play, then humans break all the rules. We're generalists in a galaxy of specialists. The three of them spent the next hour reading through the files. The picture that emerged was both fascinating and terrifying. The Galactic Confederation had maintained peace for over 3,000 years through a system of perfect specialization. Each species knew their place and stayed in it. Resources were shared efficiently. Conflicts were resolved by the Vexhai, mediators. Technology advanced steadily as each species perfected their particular expertise. It was a stable, peaceful, ordered society, and humanity threatened all of it simply by existing. Look at this, Maria said, pointing to a recent entry from just 5 years ago. Human technological advancement continues to accelerate. Subject species now achieving sustainable fusion power. Interstellar travel capabilities estimated within 1 to 2 decades. Confederation leadership has authorized development of advanced containment protocols. Containment protocols, Jake repeated. They're planning to do something to us. Lisa had found the most recent files. Jake, these are dated just 3 months ago, right around the time we left Earth for this mission. She read aloud. Human interstellar vessel Detected in deep space. UES Horizon conducting systematic exploration of nearby systems. Probability of human contact with Confederation assets now approaching critical levels. Station evacuation protocols activated. All monitoring personnel to withdraw to secondary positions immediately. Jake felt pieces clicking into place in his mind. That's why this station is empty. They detected our ship and ran. But why leave everything running? Maria asked. Why not just destroy the station? Because they want us to find it, Lisa said quietly. Think about it. They've been watching us for 2 centuries. They know how we think, how we react. They left this station here because they knew we'd investigate. Jake looked around the chamber, seeing it with new eyes. It's a test, or a trap, Maria added. Before Jake could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The lights changed from blue to red, and symbols flashed urgently on every screen. What's happening? Lisa called out over the noise. Maria was frantically working, at her console. I'm picking up multiple ships approaching, big ones. She looked up at Jake, her face pale. Captain, we have company. Jake activated his communicator. Ryan, what's your status? Ryan's voice crackled through the device. Captain, you need to get back here now. My sensors are showing at least 20 ships coming in fast. And sir, they're big enough to carry our entire ship inside them. Jake looked at his team. They had wanted first contact, and now they were about to get it. But based on everything they had learned in the past few hours, he wasn't sure humanity was ready for what was coming. Pack up everything you can carry, he ordered. We're leaving. Now. But as they hurried toward the exit, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late. The Galactic Confederation had found them, and humanity was about to face its first real test in a galaxy that saw them as a dangerous threat to the natural order of things. The overlooked strength that made humans different from every other species in the galaxy was about to be put to the ultimate test. Jake and his team ran through the corridors of the alien station, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. The red warning lights made everything look like a nightmare, and the alarms hurt their ears. Ryan, talk to me, Jake called into his communicator as they reached the docking port. 23 ships, Captain. Ryan's voice was tight with stress. They're surrounding us. No way to run without going through them. Jake cursed under his breath. They had walked right into a trap, just like Lisa had suspected. The aliens had left this station here knowing humans would investigate. Now they were caught. They reached the horizon and climbed aboard quickly. Jake sealed the airlock behind them and headed straight for the bridge. Through the main window, he could see the alien ships taking positions around them. They were massive, each one at least 10 times the size of the horizon. Their hulls were dark and smooth with no visible weapons, but Jake didn't find that comforting. Any communications? He asked Maria as she took her station. Coming in now, sir. Maria worked at her controls, then looked up with surprise. Captain, they're speaking English. Put it through. The voice that filled the bridge was calm and measured, with a strange accent that made each word sound carefully chosen. Human Vessel Horizon. This is Ambassador Kethvar of the Diplomatic Corps, representing the Galactic Confederation. Please respond. Jake took a deep breath. First contact. Everything humanity had dreamed of, and it was happening because they were in trouble. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship Horizon. We're responding, Ambassador. Captain. Morrison, you and your crew have accessed classified Confederation materials without authorization. This creates a difficult situation that must be resolved. We were investigating what appeared to be an abandoned station, Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. We meant no harm. We understand your intentions, Captain. However, the information you have accessed was not meant for human eyes. We must now discuss how to proceed. Lisa leaned over to Jake and whispered urgently, Be careful what you say. Remember what we read about their diplomatic caste. They're experts at this. Jake nodded. Ambassador, we're willing to talk, but I want to know why you've been watching my species for over 200 years without making contact. There was a pause before Kethvar answered. A fair question, Captain. The Confederation has observed humanity because your species presents unique challenges. We needed to understand you before deciding how to proceed. And what did you decide? Another pause, longer this time. Captain Morrison, would you and a small delegation be willing to come aboard our vessel? This conversation would be better conducted in person. Jake looked at his crew. Lisa was shaking her head slightly, but Maria seemed curious. Ryan just looked scared. What guarantees do we have for our safety? Jake asked. You have my word as a Confederation diplomat that no harm will come to you during our discussions. However, I cannot make promises about what will happen afterward until we have talked. That wasn't very comforting, but Jake didn't see that they had much choice. I'll come aboard with 2 of my crew members. Acceptable. A shuttle will dock with your vessel in 15 minutes. The communication ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Jake looked at his team. Lisa, Maria, you're with me. Ryan, keep the ship ready to run if things go bad. Sir, Ryan said quietly. Where exactly would we run to? They've got us surrounded. Jake didn't have an answer for that. The alien shuttle was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It seemed to flow rather than fly, its hull shifting and changing as it approached. When it docked with the horizon, the airlock sealed perfectly despite being designed for completely different technology. The interior of the shuttle was spacious and comfortable, with seats that adjusted themselves to fit human bodies. The pilot was their first look at an actual alien, and Jake tried not to stare. The being was tall and thin, with 4 arms and large eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Its skin had a blue-green tint, and it moved with fluid grace. The flight to the diplomatic vessel took only a few minutes, but it felt much longer. None of the humans spoke, and the alien pilot seemed content with silence. The diplomatic ship was enormous up close. The shuttle bay they entered could have held 50 ships the size of the horizon. As they walked through corridors that were clearly designed for beings much taller than humans, Jake noticed that everything seemed to adjust to their presence. Lights brightened to human comfortable levels, and the floor became less slippery under their feet. Ambassador Kethvar was waiting for them in what was obviously a meeting room. The alien was even taller than Jake had expected, nearly 8 feet high with the same 4-armed build as the pilot. But there was something about the way Kethvar carried himself that spoke of intelligence and authority. Captain Morrison, the ambassador said in that same careful English. Welcome aboard the Harmony of Purpose, please be seated. The chairs that appeared from the floor were perfectly sized for humans, which Jake found both impressive and unsettling. Everything about this meeting felt planned down to the smallest detail. Thank you for agreeing to this discussion, Kethvar continued. I understand you have questions about the Confederation's interest in humanity. More than questions, Jake replied. We found files indicating that you consider my species a threat. I'd like to know why. Kethvar settled into his own chair, all 4 arms folding in what might have been a relaxed position. Captain, how much do you know about the history of galactic civilization? Only what we learned from your files. Different species, each with their own specialties, working together peacefully. For over 3,000 years, Kethvar confirmed. The longest period of peace in galactic history. Do you know what made this possible? Jake glanced at Lisa and Maria before answering. Specialization. Each species found their role and stuck to it. Exactly. The Zalani build our cities and ships. The Korthak heal our sick and tend our biology. My own people, the Vexhai, mediate disputes and handle diplomatic relations. Every species has their place, their purpose, their contribution to the whole. And you think humans threaten that? Lisa said. Kethvar turned his large eyes toward her. Dr. Carter, isn't it? Yes, humanity does threaten our system, but perhaps not in the way you think. Explain, Jake said. The ambassador was quiet for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. Captain, in all our observations of humanity, we have never been able to determine what your species' specialty is. You are not the strongest, or the smartest, or the most technologically advanced. Yet you excel at many things that should require different evolutionary paths. Maria leaned forward. You mean because we're generalists instead of specialists? Precisely. A single human might be a warrior, a scientist, an artist, and a leader, all at once. This is impossible according to everything we know about species development, yet humans do it routinely. Jake was beginning to understand. And that scares you. It terrifies us, Kethvar admitted. Our entire civilization is built on the principle that each species has one primary function. If humanity enters galactic society as generalists, it could destabilize everything we have built. Or improve it, Lisa said quietly. Kethvar's large eyes fixed on her. Explain. Maybe the reason your civilization hasn't advanced much in 3,000 years is because everyone is locked into their roles. Maybe what you need is someone who can think outside those boundaries. The ambassador was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. That is exactly what we are afraid of, Dr. Carter. Change, the unknown, the possibility that our perfect system might not be so perfect after all. Jake felt a pieces of understanding click into place. So what happens now? Do you destroy us? To protect your way of life? That is one option being considered by the Confederation Council, Kethvar said honestly. But there are others. We could offer humanity a place in the Confederation, provided you accept genetic modification to limit your adaptive capabilities. Turn us into specialists, Maria said, her voice flat. Yes. Or we could relocate your species to a distant part of the galaxy where you would not interfere with established civilization. Jake stood up, his anger finally breaking through his diplomatic control. Those aren't choices, Ambassador. Those are ultimatums. You want to change us into something we're not, or exile us to the edge of nowhere. Kethvar remained calm. What would you suggest, Captain? Jake looked at his crew, then back at the alien diplomat. An idea was forming in his mind, crazy and dangerous, but maybe their only chance. I suggest you let us prove that humanity's differences are a strength, not a threat. Give us a chance to show you what generalists can accomplish. And how would you do that? Jake smiled, and for the first time since this conversation began, he felt confident. Give us a problem that your specialists can't solve. Something that's been bothering the Confederation for years. Let us try to fix it. Kethavar's forearm shifted in what might have been surprise. That is not an option I had considered. Maybe that's exactly the problem, Jake replied. Maybe what your perfect system needs is someone who considers options that specialists never think of. Ambassador Kethvar stared at Jake for a long moment, his large eyes unblinking. The silence in the room felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. Finally, the alien diplomat spoke. Captain Morrison, you propose something that has never been attempted. To allow an unclassified species to work on Confederation problems would require approval from the highest levels of government. Then get that approval, Jake said firmly. What do you have to lose? If we fail, you can proceed with your original plans. If we succeed, maybe you learn something new. Kethvar's forearms moved in what Jake was beginning to recognize as thoughtful gestures. There is a problem that has troubled the Confederation for over 500 years. Our specialists have been unable to solve it despite their best efforts. Lisa leaned forward in her chair. What kind of problem? The Nexus Station, Kethvar said. It is a critical hub that connects 17 different star systems. Trade, communication, and travel all flow through it. But it is failing, Maria asked. Failing how? The station was built by combining technologies from 3 different species: Zilani architecture, Korthak biological systems for life support, and HFY social coordination networks. It was meant to be our greatest achievement, proof that cooperation between specialists could create something wonderful. But it's not working, Jake guessed. The systems are incompatible in ways we never expected. The Zilani structures interfere with the Korthak biological processes. The biological systems disrupt the HFY coordination networks. The coordination networks cause stress fractures in the Zilani architecture. Kethvar's voice carried frustration that even translated across species lines. Each group of specialists can only see their part of the problem. They cannot understand how the other systems work. Jake felt excitement building in his chest. This was exactly the kind of challenge humans might be able to handle. And you want us to try to fix it? If the Council approves, yes. But, Captain, you must understand the stakes. If Nexus Station fails completely, 17 star systems will be cut off from the rest of the Confederation. Billions of beings depend on that station. No pressure, Maria muttered. Kethavar stood up, his tall form moving with fluid grace. I will contact the Council. This will take several hours. In the meantime, you will remain as our guests. Guests or prisoners? Jake asked. That depends entirely on what the Council decides, and whether you succeed if given the chance. They were escorted to comfortable quarters aboard the Harmony of Purpose. The rooms were clearly designed for humans, which Jake found both impressive and concerning. The aliens had been planning for this encounter for a long time. Left alone with his team, Jake paced the small sitting area while Lisa and Maria went over everything they had learned. Jake, are you sure about this? Lisa asked. We're talking about a problem that their best minds haven't been able to solve for 500 years. Maybe that's exactly why we can solve it, Jake replied. They keep saying we think differently. Let's prove it. Maria was working on a portable computer, accessing the files they had downloaded from the Zilani station. I'm trying to learn more about these three species and their technologies. If we're going to fix their station, we need to understand what we're working with. She pulled up holographic displays showing the different alien technologies. The Zilani architecture was all flowing curves and organic shapes, but made from materials stronger than anything humans had developed. The Korthak biological systems were living networks that could adapt and heal themselves. The Vex-High coordination systems were incredibly complex information networks that could process data from thousands of sources simultaneously. I can see why they're having problems, Lisa said, studying the displays. These technologies come from completely different approaches to engineering. It's like trying to mix oil, water, and electricity. Except humans do that all the time, Jake pointed out. We call it cooking, chemistry, electronics. We're always combining things that don't naturally go together. 6 hours later, Kethavar returned. His expression was unreadable, but Jake thought he sensed tension in the alien's posture. The Council has agreed to your proposal, the ambassador said. You will be given access to Nexus Station and full technical specifications for all three systems. You will have 1 week to propose a solution. And if we can't? Maria asked. Then the Confederation will proceed with containment protocols for humanity. Your species will be relocated to a distant region of space where you cannot interfere with galactic civilization. Jake nodded grimly. When do we start? Immediately. A transport has been prepared to take you to Nexus Station. However, there are conditions. You will be accompanied by specialist teams from all three species. They will observe your work and provide technical support, but they cannot participate in developing the solution. Why not? Lisa asked. Because if they could solve this problem by working together, they would have done so already. Their inability to think outside their specializations is what created this situation. The transport ship was larger than the Horizon but smaller than the diplomatic vessel. The flight to Nexus Station took 2 days, during which Jake and his team studied everything they could about the failing systems. The problem was worse than they had expected. Nexus Station was enormous, a city in space that housed over 1 million beings. It floated in the center of a complex network of space lanes that connected 17 different star systems. Ships arrived and departed constantly, carrying trade, goods, passengers, and vital communications, but the station was slowly dying. Power fluctuations caused by the incompatible systems were getting worse. Life support was failing in some sections. The communication networks that coordinated traffic were becoming unreliable. If something wasn't done soon, the entire hub would collapse, cutting off those 17 systems from the rest of galactic civilization. When they arrived at the station, Jake was amazed by its size. It was like looking at a small moon, but instead of rock and metal, it was made of flowing organic curves that pulsed with bioluminescent light. Docking arms reached out like tentacles, and information streams flowed across its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. It's beautiful, Maria whispered as their transport approached a docking port. And it's falling apart, added the Zalani engineer, who was their escort. The bioluminescence should be steady blue. Those red flashes indicate system conflicts. Jake could see what the engineer meant. Patches of the station's surface flickered between blue and red, like a machine having seizures. It was clear that the three different technologies were fighting each other rather than working together. They were given quarters in the central hub and immediately set to work. The specialist teams provided them with detailed technical manuals, sensor readings, and 500 years' worth of attempted solutions. Jake spread everything out in their main workroom and stared at the mountain of information. "Where do we even start?" Lisa asked. Jake picked up reports from each specialist team and noticed something immediately. "Look at this. The Zalani team focuses entirely on structural integrity. The Korthak team only looks at biological functions. The HFY team is concerned only with information flow. Each team is trying to solve their piece of the puzzle," Maria observed. "Exactly. But they're not looking at the puzzle as a whole." Jake stood up and began pacing again. What if the problem isn't that the systems are incompatible? What if the problem is that they're trying to work as separate systems instead of as one integrated system? Lisa frowned. "I don't understand." "Think about a human body," Jake explained. "Your skeleton, your circulatory system, and your nervous system are all completely different technologies. Bone, blood, and electrical signals. By alien logic, they should be incompatible. But they work together because they evolved together, as parts of one organism. So you're saying we need to make the station think of itself as one organism instead of three separate systems?" Maria asked. "Something like that. But first, we need to understand why these systems are fighting each other." Jake looked at his team with determination. "We have 6 days to figure out what the galaxy's best specialists have been missing for 500 years. "No pressure," Lisa said, echoing Maria's earlier comment. Jake smiled. "That's exactly what humans are good at, working under pressure and finding solutions that nobody else thought of." Outside their window, Nexus Station continued its slow dance between blue and red, a million lives depending on 3 humans to think differently than anyone had before. Jake barely slept for the next 3 days. His team worked around the clock, studying the 3 alien technologies and trying to understand why they couldn't work together. The specialist teams watched them with growing skepticism as the humans seemed to focus on everything except the obvious technical problems. While the Zalani engineers wanted to strengthen the structural supports, the Korthak biologists insisted the organic systems needed more nutrients, and the HFY technicians demanded better data processing capabilities. Jake and his team did something different. They went to the places where all 3 systems met. "The conflicts always happen at the interfaces," Lisa observed as they stood in a corridor where Zalani metal walls met Korthak, bio-neural networks, and HFY information streams. The air hummed with tension, and the walls flickered between colors as the systems fought each other. "Because they're trying to communicate but they don't speak the same language," Maria added. "Look at this data stream. The HFY system is sending information at a rate the bio-networks can't process. The overload causes stress in the organic systems, which makes them release chemicals that corrode the Zalani structures." Jake nodded. "And when the structures weaken, they can't support the data processing nodes properly. So the HFY systems work harder to compensate, which creates more data flow, which overloads the bio-networks even more." "A feedback loop," Lisa said. "Each system trying to fix the problem actually makes it worse." On the 4th day, Jake called a meeting with all the specialist teams. The conference room was large enough to accommodate the different alien species, but the tension in the air was thick. The specialists had been patient, but Jake could see they were losing faith in the human approach. "You have spent 4 days studying interfaces instead of core systems," complained Architect Prime Veltar, the lead Zalani engineer. "The structural damage requires immediate reinforcement. The bio-neural networks are dying from chemical stress," added Chief Biologist Mordak of the Korthak. "We must address the organic failures first. Data processing efficiency has dropped another 12% since you arrived," stated Information Coordinator Zethrin, the HFY representative. The communication networks require optimization immediately. Jake held up his hands for silence. You're all right, and you're all wrong. The alien stared at him with expressions that ranged from confusion to anger. Each of your systems is working perfectly, Jake continued. The problem isn't with any individual technology. The problem is that you built 3 separate systems and tried to force them to work in the same space. That is the point of cooperation, Veltar said stiffly. Different specialties contributing to a whole. No, Jake said. That's the point of combination, not cooperation. True cooperation means the systems work together as one organism, not 3 separate parts fighting for space. Maria stepped forward and activated a holographic display showing the station's layout. Look at how you designed this place. Zilani, sections here, Korthak sections there, Vexhi sections in the middle. Each system has its own territory. But living organisms don't work that way, Lisa added. In a human body, the skeleton doesn't have its own separate area. Blood vessels run through bone. Nerves connect to muscles. Everything interacts with everything else. Jake pointed to the hologram. Your station is failing because you designed it like 3 roommates sharing an apartment, not like one integrated being. The systems are fighting because they don't understand they're supposed to be parts of the same organism. Zethran's information processing nodes flickered rapidly. Are you suggesting we rebuild the entire station? I'm suggesting we teach the systems to talk to each other properly, Jake said. Maria, show them what we found. Maria brought up a new display showing data flows throughout the station. We've been analyzing the communication patterns between your systems. The Vexhi networks are sending data in discrete packets at high speed. The Korthak bio-networks process information in continuous waves at moderate speed. The Zilani structures respond to steady, low-frequency signals. 3. Completely different communication protocols, Lisa explained. It's like having a conversation where one person speaks very fast French, another speaks slow German, and the third only understands Italian. Jake smiled as he saw understanding begin to dawn on some of the alien faces. But humans speak all 3 languages. What do you mean? Asked Mordak. We mean we can build translation systems, Jake said. Not just language translators, but technology translators. Interfaces that convert Vexhi data packets into Korthak bio waves and Zilani. Structural commands. We can make your 3 systems think they're all the same kind of system, Maria added. The room fell silent as the specialists considered this. It was Veltar who spoke first. You are proposing to create hybrid technologies that combine all 3 approaches. Exactly, Jake said. Instead of trying to make Zilani, Korthak, and Vexhi systems work together while staying separate, we create new systems that are part Zilani, part Korthak, and part Vexhi all at once. That is impossible, Zethran stated flatly. Each species' technology is based on completely different principles. Is it? Lisa challenged. Or is that just what you've been taught to believe? Jake, show them the prototype. Jake activated a small device they had built over the past day. It was ugly by any aesthetic standard. A crude combination of Zilani crystal matrix, Korthak neural fibers, and Vexhi processing nodes, all wired together with human engineering. This shouldn't work according to your specialists, Jake said. The technologies are too different. He activated the device. Immediately, the conflicting signals in the room began to harmonize. The wall panels stopped flickering and settled into a steady, pleasant blue glow. The air stopped humming with tension. How? Whispered Mordak. Human engineering, Maria said proudly. We're generalists. We don't see Zilani technology or Korthak technology or Vexhi technology. We just see technology. And when you look at it that way, the similarities become obvious. Jake gestured to the device. Crystal matrices store and transmit energy. So do neural networks and data processing nodes. They're all doing the same job, just in different ways. When you create hybrid interfaces that speak all 3 languages, they can work together instead of fighting. Over the next 2 days, working with increasingly excited specialist teams, the humans designed a network of hybrid interfaces throughout Nexus Station. Instead of trying to fix the conflicts between systems, they created translation layers that let each system communicate with the others in ways they could understand. The results were immediate and dramatic. Power fluctuations stopped as the three technologies began working in harmony. Life support improved as biosystems could receive proper data from structural sensors. Communications became faster and more reliable as organic networks and crystal matrices shared processing loads. Ambassador Kethavar arrived on the final day to witness the testing. As they stood in the central control room, watching status displays that showed green across the board for the first time in decades, his expression was one of amazement. 500 years, he said quietly. Our best specialists worked on this problem for 500 years, and they would have solved it eventually, Jake said diplomatically. They just needed someone who could see the connections they couldn't. You solved it in 6 days. Because we're not specialists, Lisa said. We could see the whole picture instead of just our piece of it. Kethavar turned to face Jake directly. Captain Morrison, you have proven your point. Humanity's refusal to specialize is indeed a strength, not a weakness. So what happens now? Jake asked. Now we return to the Confederation Council with a new perspective, Kethavar said. Perhaps it is time for galactic civilization to learn from human adaptability rather than fear it. Maria smiled. Does this mean we're welcome in your confederation? More than welcome, Kethavar replied. Essential. We have spent 3,000 years perfecting our specializations, but we have forgotten how to grow. Humanity can teach us to adapt, to change, to become more than the sum of our parts. Jake looked around at the control room where alien specialists were working together with human engineers, sharing ideas and learning from each other. The strict boundaries between different kinds of technology were already beginning to blur as hybrid systems proved more effective than pure ones. There's just one condition, Jake said. Kethavar tilted his head. Yes? We don't become another specialist caste. We stay generalists. We stay human. I would not have it any other way, Captain. The galaxy needs humans to remain exactly what you are. As the UES Horizon prepared to return to Earth with its alien escort, Jake stood on the bridge looking at the stars ahead. They were returning home with news that would change everything. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and their greatest weakness had become their greatest strength. The overlooked strength that made aliens fear humanity had become the bridge to a new kind of galactic civilization, one where adaptability and specialization could work together to create something greater than either could achieve alone. For the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy was ready to grow again.